Developing Grading System for On-Ice Training by Sean Molin, Bethel University. A little bit about the background. This is about me as a follower, along with my collaborators, a collaborative initiative to develop a grading system to improve student behavior. I was part of the on-ice training department of a private school that specializes in elite hockey training. I was there for 3 years. This initiative starts towards the end of the second year, continues through the third year. It was precipitated by poor behavior during on-ice classes, which was causing major conflicts. The problem definition: on-ice leadership lacked a system for rewarding students' good behavior and dealing with bad behavior during on-ice classes. There were 3 key takeaways. Students were often unmotivated. They got away with bad behavior. Punishment was inconsistent, and it created a lot of conflict between on-ice leadership and other stakeholders. Taking a look at stakeholders, it's important to note that from year 1 to year 2, there was a lot of turnover, especially in the hockey department. The hockey director changed, and there was a lot of change in the on-ice leadership. There was also quite a few new teachers as well. As far as how the business works, the owner oversees pretty much everything. It's a small company, and she likes to have her hands in everything, but she's also very busy with a very large insurance company that she runs. The principal oversees the teachers. Also, the students are in the class with the teachers about half the day. The other half of the day, they're with the hockey on the hockey side, which is run by the hockey director, which each one kind of varies in how much they're involved, and the on-ice leadership, who really run the day-to-day activities over there. The problem context: we handled the day-to-day discipline, but the owner often stepped in and micromanaged how we did it. I know an example of Howard Hughes and Lippman Blumen. Our owner's behavior was very similar to him. She had a lot of credibility from her business, but she would come in, offer up a lot of ideas, and do it kind of haphazard. So the followers, she would just sort of steamroll. They learned about this behavior and really sat back, just kind of stayed out of her way. And this behavior by the owner really created chaos and made discipline very inconsistent. And a lot of the discipline, what we found was that it was really based on parents and students complaining to the owner, and then she would come down and intimidate us as a way to gain compliance and to get her way. For most of the first 2 years, there was continued problems on the ice that resulted in conflict between the owner and the staff. So the collaborative initiative is how I could, as a follower, collaborate within the organization to solve the problem of poor student behavior. I note that a lot of the stuff that we've read in this class is written from the vantage point of the leader. But what happens when there's a problem that isn't solved by the leader? The courageous leader is challenged to step up and challenge the status quo. But how does that work? How does the follower effectively collaborate to solve a problem? I note that as a courageous follower, I saw that the rules and procedures were not serving the stakeholders, but I also could not do this alone. So this comes the collaborative initiative, as that I needed to collaborate to change the culture and the rules. This is an account of this process of a collaboration to develop a grading system, and I'll be focusing on attempts at collaboration as well as themes of followership and toxic leadership. So the first attempt at the grading system happened towards the end of the second school year. The problems, as I said, were going on through that entire time, and I had a conversation with one of my on-ice team members about the problem and possible solution. Typically, I'm a star follower. I'm very independent in my thinking, but I'm also very positive. But due to the toxic leadership, it kind of made me sink back kind of into a pragmatic follower role. But every once in a while, I would be my natural self and make attempts at solving problems. We decided that a grading system would be a great way to go, so we met with our superiors, told them our idea. We got their a blessing. Just to describe the system, basically it's really simple. The kids would get 3 points for the day, lose 1 point for each infraction. If they lost all their points, they would have to go to the school. They also had the ability to get an extra point if they had exemplary behavior. Just a brief description about my partner. We both shared ownership as we shared a desire to solve the problem. We were both dealing with it. I used my strengths to kind of develop the system, and he was very good at turning the system into a reality and keeping the grades up, taking detailed notes. We worked well as a team, and it made work more enjoyable. So continuing on with the first attempt, we noticed, the entire staff noticed a remarkable change in the effort and attitude. The high-performing students would really challenge themselves to go for an extra point, and it clearly showed in their effort. And the students that struggled with disciplinary issues knew they were being watched, and they didn't want to get in trouble. It took a lot of time to do it, but it was worth it. But after a month, the owner stepped in and stopped the grading. We're not sure exactly why, but we assume it's because she didn't want her kids to be graded, as well as the other kids, her friends, their parents, didn't want them to kind of peer behind the veil and see what was happening in the school. This was a behavior of unpredictability, which is another common aspect of toxic leadership. The owner's unpredictable micromanagement left everyone on edge and depressed their independent thinking and positive dispositions. She had a mentality of let's just manage the kids. You don't need a system. So we suffered through the last month with no system. So the school year 2 ended, got into summer vacation, got away for a little bit, was able to clear my head. Also, during that time, the hockey director was let go for the second year in a row. I note that this was, in my opinion, scapegoating, as I felt that there were systemic problems that were being blamed on the hockey directors. But now we had 2 new hockey directors, and we met all together in a meeting in the summer. And I mentioned that we should try the grades. I thought they would really work. I was going to develop it more and make it into more of a organized system that we would start at the beginning of the year. But the owner said she didn't want to do it, and that I feel that she thought the new hockey directors would just be able to handle them. So looking at stakeholders for the year 3, there was new hockey directors. Almost all the on-ice leadership had changed. I was still there, and about half the teachers were gone. So going into the school year 3, there was a lot of energy and momentum. We were moving into a new school building. The hockey rink was actually much further from the school. In the beginning of the year, there's typically not a lot of problems. The staff has energy, so the owner typically thinks that the problems are fixed. But as we move along, the hockey directors kind of got burnt out after the first couple of months, stopped coming over, started doing other stuff. Some silos were beginning to form. They were based on shifting priorities by the staff, and also the physical distance between the school and the hockey rink. And now we were kind of on our own, and student behavior started becoming worse. We would be regularly berated because of the problems. And I note that another behavior that must be challenged is chronic screaming by a leader. Explosive anger is intimidating and tears the fabric of relationships. Things get done, but at a very heavy price. This perfectly describes kind of what we dealt with our leader. So going into the second attempt at grading, I began discussing the grading system with another partner as my old partner left. The high turnover made collaborating difficult because each year the on-ice group was almost entirely different. He had a background in another private school and was very skilled at creating shareable documents. We decided to go to the principal this time. We got approval to do a grading system. This one was shareable, and we also recommended that the grades be used in quarterly conferences. The grades had a very similar positive effect on the student behavior. We took turns entering the grades for each day. It was very time consuming. We were a little understaffed, and the work schedules were not coordinated or optimized. You could say we were struggling with a resource bottleneck. The grades were entered for a few months, but the staff was getting tired of putting them in. The staff felt there was no point in doing the grades, as no one at the school really asked about them, and the owner stepped in and said we shouldn't use them for conferences. So our objectives were not tied into any thematic goal, and there was no metrics for our performance, and our efforts did not have a clear, recognizable purpose, and so it lost momentum. The students also began to see through the grades as there lacked any real consequences. At the same point, at some point later in the year, the grades are no longer entered and no one really noticed. I note that silos that divided the different departments were the main cause in the failure of the system. We were very invested because we dealt with the problems and knew it would take to solve them, but the hockey directors, owner, and principal were very detached from our reality and had other interests that were more important to them and did not know know enough about the problem to know it needed to happen to solve it. So the conclusion to School 3, after dealing with these same issues of poor student behavior and toxic leadership, I left the school at the end of the year. I know, although moral action does not always require leaving a group or organization, it always implies the potential of leaving if the offending situation is not corrected or indeed if we ourselves have offended the core values of the group. Out of the 6 members of the on-ice staff, 5 of them left after the year for similar reasons. And finally, key takeaways. 1, courageous followers cannot change the organizational culture without collaboration. And I would add, you need a lot of collaboration to really change the culture. And especially, you need some buy-in from upper management. Toxic leadership kills collaboration. It changes their followership styles. It shrinks people back, makes them less likely to bring up ideas and to trust the leaders and each other. Also, some collaborative initiatives are just destined to fail based on organizational culture. And that's what I thought in this situation, is that it probably was destined to fail as there was toxic leadership and there was really some more systemic problems that were unaddressed that caused this problem to continue.